Alrighty, hey guys, what's up? So, I know that it's been a hot minute since I've gotten back to you with these, and I feel like I should keep you up to date with all this, that, and the other. So, I have been a little bit busy as of the past couple weeks, and it's mostly been school stuff. Lots of, getting readjusted because I'm finally going back after, a hot minute. So, I like to prioritize that. I hope that you understand. Hopefully, knowing the fact that I've spread out, not even 40 videos over maybe 2 years, you should be aware of the fact that I am not going to be uploading with the most consistency possible. This is yeah, this is a hobby more so than a necessity, and I appreciate you sticking around in spite of that. But bearing that in mind, I actually did try to, you know, do the necessary work to get this all set up and squared away two times before I had a little bit of a break in between that. Neither of which I felt super satisfied with. And, if you've been around for a minute, you should know that I do delete plenty of my own videos before they even go up because I just don't feel satisfied with the final product. I, in fact, did that for the Grand Slam Finals game, which, level 56 won. Congratulations to him, obviously. Didn't feel I gave a really great narration there. I also did Blunder versus ABR for Smogon Tour, which I thought I did a decent job with, but at the end of the day, I was just not feeling it. I had, I think, a pretty interesting take on the BW game, if I do say so myself, but I figured that, not a big deal, and at the end of the day, I would be encroaching on territory of, plenty of other players. I'm sure that your average OU tour man covered it to some capacity, as well as Blunder himself, if I'm recalling correctly, so, no great loss there. But, circling back to the game, backstory. We were, rather, as a team, looking not super great. We're taking some tough losses, whereas Tony's team, known colloquially as the ABRs, were doing not only well, but getting some favorable odds as well. They were, I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone following the tour, probably the most hated team, which, take it or leave it. I don't really feel some way about it, so it's just something to say more than anything else. But I felt like it was pretty important to really make a strong impact with this game, being that it was going to be my first game of the series, or rather the phase. And originally it was going to take part on I think the second Tuesday of the phase, but it ended up getting pushed back to Thursday. I ended up playing two games on the same day, like maybe, one a couple hours after the next, but did feel some way about it. And in spite of that, real strong feeling that I have to, do well in this game, I really wasn't feeling that same passion on the building front. Like, it just felt like, not to disrespect Natalie in any way. I think that she's a quality player, and I, in fact, got to speak with her a little bit more personally, week and a half later. And she's a good person, I think. So, credit to her. I don't know, I really couldn't find that, ephemeral spark, something to really draw me in. So I just kind of worked off what I would consider a pretty, basic concept. As you can see, this is my team for the week. Super standard in, practice, in application. It has, pretty much everything you would expect from a team like this. I think that, it's certainly not bad, but, given how I've been trying to, mess around with things and go a little left field with my other stuff, I was a little disappointed with myself. Still, it is a pretty effective team, being good against most of the stuff that people were using at the time. It has, Jellicent as a more active water, which is something that I think was getting slept on at that moment. There was a lot of more passive, just haze, Milotics, stuff that really, really rely on getting that Scald Burn directly to not get kind of muddled under really aggressive sequences from stuff like Gators and whatnot, especially Superpower SD Gator, which was, the big flavor of the week for that. I guess you would call it a month. The first two phases of Snake. So that was kind of one-upping that trend a little bit. I think that using both Cresselia and a Rush Talking Snorlax, mine being a curse set, which was the focus of the team, quote unquote, was a little bit of a stretch in the right direction because a lot of people were adopting Toxic Nidoqueen as a means of baiting and punishing Crust balances, and this kind of went up that trend as well. It also uses Pilot One, which I think is cool, but I'll dissect that in a bit. But really, that's all that there is to it. I'm just gonna get into the team itself. So, boop. We've got standard Snorlax. I like to run a lot more physical defense than I think most people typically do. The reason being that 9 times out of 10 for me, I don't rely on Snorlax to be playing into those really aggressive special attackers. I feel like it is more of a loose defensive countermeasure, and there is so much more application to the defense boosts because it allows him to sit in on Pokemon that it normally would be, forced into rest cycles with earlier for, and it makes the process of, say, beating into it with a Rhyperior only to sitch in your SD Gator and try to pressure avoiding good sleep talk rolls, for example, some kind of like really battery based thing that I think that a lot of bulky offenses, and particularly stuff that Natalie was bringing, would try to instigate. And having that defense goes miles in combating and otherwise making a problem of that. I think that return is way better than Body Slam on the whole, unless you're running a like really unique kind of bulky offense with like mid-tier beaters, which really doesn't seem to fit on a lot of Curse-Lax builds for my money. So I just kind of avoided it outright. Then you've got the fast Cresselia. It is, of course, EV to outpace Adamant, Honchkrow, Tyrantrum, which is really more of an extension of the Jolly Beware benchmark, being 240. This is my short-term, quote-unquote, foolproof answer to most fighters in the tier. I mean, Virizion, I think, has started to pick up now, but at the time it was pretty much nowhere. I only used it versus Esh, and I think there were a couple more. I believe Chill Shadow is utilizing it to effect in this tour, but for the most part it hasn't been used. I think it's an underrated Pokemon still, but I digress. It was pretty effective for what I thought it was. It's really standard. It's the dual stabs, Fairy ZM as a means to help it target darks and be that knockoff buffer while still maintaining value. It is pretty standard stat. The only real difference is that the really fast variants weren't exceedingly common. So that's that. And then we have a fully physically defensive, like not speedy Chestnut at all, which also I guess ran sort of counter to what was being seen at the time. I felt like more often than not, the fact that people were trying to adapt so aggressively to Gligar kind of put them on the back foot more often than not, especially when those Gligar teams themselves were learning how to one-up those Chestnut sequences, those, because the idea of these taunt-based balances that try to keep hazards up on the field versus your standard Gligar balance have been around for a long-ass time. One team that folks would probably credit it to is Aldo's freaking Registeel, Chestnut, Sharpedo. Is it Gligar? I believe Gligar, Mismagius, Tyrantrum team. Yes, those are, I believe, the 6 members. I might be getting one of them wrong. If so, whoopsie daisy, but I should really know that. But that's kind of the gist of those kind of teams around that point, and it's cool, but in doing so, you really stifle Chestnut's ability to take hits, and a lot of those teams use Chestnut as their initial Durant switch, and that's awful because it doesn't even, like, loosely check Durants. It just, Hone Claws and Hone Claws again, and it doesn't do anything back because it turns out that you just taunt it, and then you can only respond back with Wood Hammer. So, This kind of helps out with that a lot. It also helps with gators because you can no longer get broken down by pretty much anything they throw around at you. It's something nice to have just in case because, Jellicent as my water means that I can potentially lose if it's like, if it's crunch, and I don't want to have to initial switch my Jellicent and risk that. It's just good for a slew of reasons. And I think that people should stop, autopiloting onto certain choices. Again, in that vein, moving right down, we got the not fast Jellicent. I have heard so many people say that fast Jellicent is the only Jellicent, and it feels archaic almost. I recognize that yes, being able to outspeed a Gligar is nice, but Gligar can also run speed, and it just needs most Gligar are going to be running 220, so you're going to have to be running Timid Jellicent if you want to realistically try for outspeeding Gligar. And even then, those Gligar can also choose to run their 242 if you really want, like I have, and it's totally feasible. But the thing is that Gligar can sort of accommodate that, but with Jellicent, now you're just immediately dying to a Durant because you have no investment in defense, or you're taking 60 from a Escavalier Megahorn or something like that. It's ridiculous. There is so much you lose from going for that, and it's just to taunt a couple Pokemon, and I just don't like it at all. It feels... You have to recognize the repercussions of abandoning one's defensive capabilities in order to fulfill that stall-breaking, quote-unquote, utility, and I feel like there's just too much lost with most Jellicent to be able to do that nowadays. So for my money, fat, a little bit of speed is all you should go for. And that is the end of that rant. And then we go on to Piloswine, which I think was a pretty cool Pokemon. I think, well, still a good Pokemon because it's going to be smacking around most removal pretty easily. It's pressuring the Gligar, pressuring the Xatu, etc., etc. And it also really puts a damper on teams like Zygarde offenses that can generally get away with switching your Zygarde on a free turn, toxic the predicted Chestnut, and then just fucking swing momentum whenever it comes in otherwise, because a poison Chestnut doesn't like to switch in and just get chipped away at. It hates that, and this kind of throws a bit of a wedge in all of those kind of sequences because you can switch in, take an attack pretty easily, fire off an Ice Shard, at least threaten an Ice Shard. It's nifty. It does a lot of things. It helps balances not have to really bend themselves over trying to deal with a potential DD-Gon, even though DD-Gon in theory is a lot more threatening than it DD-Gon is a lot more threatening in theory than it is in application, as evidenced by just how few DD Flygon you saw in Snake this season, which I thought was very telling. It was very sharp on, I think, the part of most of the people participating. I really liked the pool of players in this Snake draft. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, into that. Doublade. I was a little bit torn on this slot because I felt like the team sort of kind of needed speed control, and I felt it hurt too much of the team's ability to push through balances to sort of, one might say, compromise on a Scarfer of any nature. So I ended up going with the Blade here, which sort of fulfills most of the needs that I was expecting of a theoretical Scarfer in this slot. The Steel typing is obviously nice for a lot of things. It allows me to sort of soft play into Como, because Como is ridiculous. Goddamn. It can chip things, and more importantly, there are plenty of sequences against typical balances wherein you want to be able to, well, rather, there are many sequences or balances, wherein the person's double-bladed check is also their Snorlax check. Examples being stuff like Haze Milo, Taunt Chestnut, Taunt Gligar even, which, didn't see as much commonality, but it was certainly around and at least theory-mined to decent effect. And this was something that I felt was malleable to the point where I can make pushes with one or the other to set up that partner. And it has an interesting exchange in that actually sees the light of day in the game. Spoilers. Actually, for the longest time, I was debating messing around with coverage options because I felt like Shadow Claw was mildly redundant here. I was considering the potential of both Toxic and Aerial Ace in the vein of pressuring those common switch-ins, because Aerial Ace is really cool because it targets the Chestnut like immediately. You can really apply pressure outright on that Pokemon, which is great for the Lax. Or of course Toxic covering both that in a slower capacity, obviously, and Milotic, but ultimately I was kind of just lazy and threw in the Shadow Claw just because it was the safe option. And take it for what you will, but if you are going to ever use this team, I would, give consideration to messing with that slot a bit. But that is about what I can say on the team itself, so with that in mind, I'm going to get into the game. Alrighty, so we're back at it, and I am, of course, on this side, Studio Suicide 1980. Oh, it is, shoot, totally forgot. This is a, allusion to the freaking Tim Hecker song of the same name. I have, for those of you that weren't really keeping track or caring, which is totally valid, I've been doing my alts after songs because that's my niche, and I mean it's not a good one, but it's all I got, so I gotta play to my strengths, But yeah. So on this side, and looking at her team right here, pretty interesting stuff. I actually, when looking at it, I thought to myself that this looks fucking Omfuga as fuck, not even realizing at the time of that she is actually on Omfuga's team, and it was later confirmed by Omfuga himself that he did build this. And that was kind of the problem with this fucking team tour. It's, for a lot of people, it was a little stressful building 3 teams in 2 weeks, and I guess I didn't really mind it as much, but part of it was like there was this real huge disconnect between your opponents and what teams they were on. Like, I really paid no mind to that with almost anyone I played. So, like, I was able to be like, oh yeah, Natalie's, Tony's arguer only because I talked to Tony on a semi-regular basis, and he would, talk about his team, and I was like, oh yeah, right. But I was never like, oh yeah, Omfuga is also on her team. Ergo, it would make sense that this is that. So it didn't really help me in my prep work at all, but yeah, that was kind of a weird one for me. But looking at her team, I was more threatened than anything by this here freaking Bannett, which not only bothers this Lax because, obviously I don't have Crunch. I was giving mine to it more so because of Miss Magius than anything else, but ended up going for it just because of, how open it is on the free turns. I don't think I have a team, quite actively built to suppress counterplay as warrants that kind of a pick. So, mono attacking, threatening to most of my team. Obviously, Ghost resists, not great. I have Chestnut, which can, mash into it, but that's really all I've got. Also, potentially, if this is Home Claws Durant, I have to be pretty cautious about that. I have to, be mindful of pretty much throughout this whole game my own Chestnut's HP which I'm going to have to micromanage decently to have a shot in the game, and just be mindful of how I let Chip go through both on my side and onto his, relevant Pokemon. I think I should have every right to do decently, but it's going to mandate a little bit of maneuvering on my part. So, and I should probably slow down the thing just so that I remember. But I lead off with Jellicent, pretty much saying that it's going to match up well or decently enough versus pretty much everything on his team and her team. Sorry, you have to understand, it is a Pokemon is a male-dominated game, so when I run counter to that, it is unusual. No offense to her at all. So I lead Jellicent, anticipating more or less anything. If looking at it, I was more than willing to accept a trade at this point. If hypothetically she led Banette, I was more than willing to take a hefty hit in order to get a burn on it. Obviously, if he leads Registeel, that's fine. If he leads Zygarde, that's also fine. I would have to, give some consideration to the Toxic versus Thousand Arrows, but, not that big a deal. It's more or less my safest option right now, and the one that allows me to push my win condition the best early on. But seeing her lead Chestnut, I decided to just go out with it and see if I can, go for the Scald Burn. I'm almost positive she'll recognize that if I Wisp and get the burn there, that she is put in a huge disadvantage right out of the gate. So knowing that, I go for the Scald in the same vein, looking for a burn, obviously. And not getting it, I just decide to concede that and go to my Cresselia. And now is where I need to start making a little bit more aggressive plays. And part of this is conditioning, in addition to, obviously, getting my licks in. These sequences, rather, are going to get her expecting me to make the aggressive play in the future, which I'm going to use to my advantage later. But I double the Piloswine, anticipating her to try to throw off a Toxic or her Rocks. I go immediately for the Earthquake and then set up Stealth Rock, predicting either, more likely a Protect, but also a potential switch into something like Cresselia. However, she does end up opting to go into her Chestnut, and I decide that regardless of how she wants to play this, I am willing to absolutely go for damage if she's going to let me have it. So she goes for Wood Hammer. It does a ton as I fire off an Icicle Crash, and looking at that damage actually tells me that she is in fact running a pretty fast Chestnut. That damage is kind of pitiful for, not a fast Chestnut, but still something to note here. And I believe, do I again go for a double? I think I do. Do I? Man, I'm slow. Okay, no, I'm not that crazy. Gracious, it's been a minute. Though I think I would have considered it. And now recognizing that I should at this point try to avoid do anything too outlandish there, I just go to my Snorlax and I believe just set up a curse. Do I not? Because the risk associated is fairly low by this point. And she shows the Lunar Dance, which is interesting to me, but okay. Yeah, I throw the curse in order to, what I thought, attempt to force the hand of the Durant. However, showing the Lunar Dance, very interesting move. I would have expected, the more conservative status option on this team, but not in fact the case, as she does go for Chestnut, which is a good move, obviously recognizing how important this Pokemon is in this matchup. So I decide to make another Cresselia pivot, this time looking to get up my hazards. My spikes, more specifically, on the Registeel. Now, unfortunately, I was thinking that the Taunt Bluff would be sufficient, because I don't in fact have Toxic, as I think I showed. I have Roar. However, that is honestly fine for me because at this stage in the game, her ability to directly threaten that was pretty much consolidated to Toxic, and I think that with Zygarde on the board, the inevitability of me getting hit with a Toxic was pretty much there. So that is totally fine with me. And now I just choose to bring out my Doublade here and now, and I believe SD, yes? Yes, I do go for this. And this is kind of where that conditioning that I was talking about earlier comes in. She goes for the synthesis, predicting what I anticipate to just have been an attack, as prior to this point I've been, predicting the very cautious, tender-footed, safe play and trying to make moves off that, and now I choose to, exploit that, go for another Swords Dance, and just punch through this Chestnut. I think that, yeah, I even try for a fourth, just because if hypothetically she decides to go for it, why not? It pretty much wins me the game then and there, because it ensures that Durant dies to the Sneak, because after Stealth Rock plus Stealth Rock plus Spikes, I only very rarely KO. I believe it's like an 18% chance or so. Now, she has to, at this point, sacrifice one Pokemon to get through to me, and she chooses Bayonet. Now, I was talking this over with Omfuga, and I believe herself even later, and we came to the consensus that this probably was not, in fact, the sack. It was probably better to go for Durant there and try to conserve the Bayonet, just because of how much more threatening it would be to my team. Now, it doesn't necessarily seal the game for her, but it definitely made it more difficult when it didn't need to be. So, I thought that was something to note, but it would have given her a better chance when I didn't necessarily need it. But what this opens up for me is now, technically, she doesn't have a resolute response to Snorlax on really any level. Hypothetically, I go to Chestnut here, which I do, and just ensuring that it's not Scarf, which it turns out to be from that play, I do go for the Wood Hammer. If I was 100% certain it was Scarf, I would obviously, just go for the Synthesis first, but in the case that she was bluffing, her best play was to, Hone Claws there and go for damage. But as is, it is totally safe to just go for the Wood Hammer here. And I believe I just do Hard Switch to Lax? Yes, I Hard Switch to Lax. Knowing that even if the double was made, I would be, safe from any shenanigans. She would have to commit to Outrage to even come close to killing me. So at this point, I just go for the Curse, obviously my safest play. Only real response is just to try to hard Zygarde and go for the crit, which I probably don't even need to go that slowly for. She does get with the Outrage, but it's really not a big deal at this point because I can just go to Cresselia, assuredly pick up my KO, show off the Twinkle Tackle, the Z move, and proceed to just sack the Cresselia to this Registeel, which, ensures that I can go to Jellicent and taunt it, studying it down, and, winning me this game. Just gonna go through the sequence, blah, 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 and I get the taunt off, and that is the game. So, I think that there were a couple plays that maybe could have been reassessed. Obviously, I talked about the, Bayonet versus Durant one. Obviously, as I said, Durant does have the potential to be KO'd by Shadow Sneak at that range. I think I'll put the calc up, but it's very minuscule, and obviously one that she would have to bank off anyway. So probably better that that happened, and obviously there was consideration of the Chestnut synthesis being wrong, though I feel like it's far less egregious, and given how I had been playing to that point, it makes enough sense. I think that it was an interesting game. There was a lot of interesting choices. It was really unique to see how we ended up with a moderately similar backbone. What with this being my first chestnut and maybe hers as well. But cool conclusions from both. I liked the game a lot. It was fun. Pokemon is cool. And, with that, I would be moving on to my fifth game, which hopefully I'll be able to get to in a more timely fashion. Hopefully I can, deliver that a little earlier. I'll be getting to it soon. Probably will toss up another video, maybe music related, in the near future as well, but we will see. Thank you guys for watching. I will catch you around, and I'll stay chimping, guys.